Good afternoon, everyone. It is about 2:02, June 15th. I'm gonna go ahead and call the meeting to order. The first matter is gonna be adoption of the agenda. Can I have a motion regarding the agenda?
Make a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Was that a second?
Come on, Jermaine.
It was a second. So moved. Yes.
Okay, all right. The motion's been made and properly second. Cornelia, can you please call the roll?
Yes, ma'am. Cotton,
Yes.
Lapine,
Yes.
Lindsay,
Here.
Clark,
Here.
Johnson,
Here.
Coach V. Did he get on yet? No?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Motion approved.
Thank you. Next action item is going to be the approval of the minutes from the May 18th, 2018 and June 8th, 2020 special call meetings. I guess I'll take them at the same time unless someone has an objection to that. Okay. Can I have a motion regarding the minutes from those two special call meetings?
Lisa, what's the two dates again?
May 18th, 2020 and June 8th, 2020.
It's on the agenda. I
I'll
make
make
the
the
motion.
motion.
Okay.
I'll make the motion that we accept the minutes from the meeting on 5/18 and June 20th.
Hey.
8th.
Hey.
I'm dyslexic.
I second.
Okay.
I second.
So motion's been made and properly second. Cornelia?
Cotton,
Yes.
Lapine,
Yes.
Lindsay,
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Coach V. Motion approved.
Thank you. Next item is going to be financial report from Brandy James. Ms. James?
Good afternoon,
What
everyone.
happened?
Good afternoon.
Okay, let me share my screen. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Okay, so what I'm going to provide for you today is an update of where we are in our finances through the month of May for both our general fund and our enterprise fund. I'm also going to give you an update of the COVID-19 financial analysis, updated for May's actual revenues and expenses, as well as our June forecast. So what you have there right now on your screen is a snapshot of our revenues and expenses for our general fund. Again, these are actual amounts through the month of May. What you'll see is to the left of your screen, our total actual revenues for our general fund is about 15.8 million compared to 15.3 million last year. Again, you'll notice that our administrative revenues are up, but of course our program revenues are down, and that's primarily related to COVID-19 closures. Our total expenses for the general fund as of May 31st, 2020, expenses are about 14.2 million versus 13.1 million. So our actual expenses are actually up overall from last year. And those increases continue to be those items that I have discussed in the past. So we saw increased payroll expenses as well as increased IT expenses. We've also seen some increases in our custodial supplies expenses, and that's primarily related to additional supplies and PPE that was needed to assist us as we come back to work or phase back into work.
Hey, quick question.
Yes.
Is that little thing on my screen or is that your screen?
Are you talking this little thing here?
Yeah.
It is on my screen. Let me try to figure out how to get rid of it.
Okay.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah.
Yeah, much better.
Okay, my apologies. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so what you have here on your screen is our enterprise fund revenue and expenditures for, again, the 11 months ended May 31st. Our total enterprise revenues are about $672,000 versus $692,000 last year. And you'll see on your screen here when you compare our revenues for each category for fiscal year 2020 versus fiscal year 2019, you'll notice that our green fees to date have increased, but we're still seeing decreases in our cart rentals and our pro shop concession revenues. And because of those decreases, that is why we're seeing an overall decrease for the year of about 3%. For our green fees, we have seen increased revenues related to green fees due to increased activity at our golf course for the months of April and May. To give you an impact on what that is, for the month of May, we saw approximately 3,254 rounds of golf being played at the golf course. And for the month of April, we saw about 2,895 rounds of golf. Before April and May, we were trending again about 1,200 rounds of golf a month. So again, we've seen increases in traffic to the golf course over the last few months. Our total expenses for the enterprise fund through May, they continue to be increased. Our total expenses are about $735,000 versus $656,000 when you compare this time last year. Those increases primarily, again, as you see on your screen, are related to payroll and benefits, and we've had some increases related to repairs and maintenance and capital outlay expenses. Are there any questions on either the general fund or the revenues and expenditures through May? If not, I'll go ahead and give you an update on the COVID-19 financial impact. Again, this analysis has been updated for actual expenses and revenues through May. And then we've also made some changes to our June forecasted revenue and expense numbers. So starting with our general fund revenue, you'll see that we're projecting that our total general fund revenue will be flat, and that's when compared to last year. And again, that's primarily due to decreases in our program revenue. Our total general fund expenditures, we are projecting about a 6% increase over last year. And that increase, again, is primarily related to those increases in expenses that I discussed in the last slide. What this slide is showing you by month, a comparison of our general fund revenue, our program, as well as our administrative revenue. You'll see here that in the month of April, our program revenues were down. Well, actually, we processed about $55,000 worth of rental program revenues. For the month of May, we have also processed an additional $10,000 in revenues, refunds, and that is primarily related to refunds for rentals. For the month of June, we are projecting that we will probably have an additional 12,000 in revenue refunds that we will process for that month. So when you look at the program revenue and the COVID-19 impact starting in March, between lost revenues and refunds that we've already processed, we're projecting that that impact is about 528,000 reduction in those program revenues. Are there any questions on that?
So it seems like money, expenses are going up and our income is going extremely down. So what type of impact is that going to have on the agency outside of what we have going on?
Okay, so the revenues, again, that impact started in March, and again, that's related to COVID-19. Those increase in expenditures were already experienced or actually been realized before March, and actually our average monthly expenses have since March have actually gone down when you compare it to last year. So again, even though year to date we are up in expenses for this time frame between March and June, our expenditures again on average per month have gone down because we haven't had certain expenditures like program expenses, but we still continue to have payroll and benefit expenses. We've also had to have some additional property management expenses related to making sure that we're prepared for COVID-19. So I wouldn't say that, because I wouldn't say that we're continuing to spend or exceed our expenditures during this time. Again, there are some expenses that we had to incur related to COVID-19, and those increases in expenditures were already baked in the cake prior to getting to March of 2020. Any other questions on this comparison?
Is there any way? Yeah, is there any way we can talk with county?
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time.
About
Is this
some of the
Coach B?
expenditures that we've had to incur. Well, so
I can't hear him either.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Coach B, I can't hear you.
With county council regarding the COVID-19 expenses, are there opportunities for
expenditures that
reimbursement?
we already had lined up before COVID. See if we can get some more money from them. All right, I came on late.
That's okay. I think if I'm still having a little hard time hearing you, but I think your question is, are there any chances for us to be reimbursed COVID-19 expenditures?
COVID-19 expenditures and the fact that we had lost money in this COVID-19 situation. I just say that because of all the organizations, we've made the best good faith effort to put our budget in line with that 10% reduction that they asked for. Perhaps they could have some goodwill and help us balance our budget.
I'm not sure if we would receive any reimbursement from the county, but I do believe we did submit some information last month through our state association about some of our COVID-19 related expenditures that we could possibly be reimbursed through the CARES Act. But I have not heard any additional response from that submission that we submitted last month.
And Coach V, we will continue to monitor the information coming out of Richland County. I am aware that they were established in some type of fund and application process by which entities could receive funding and reimbursement. I'm not too sure on the specifications for those funds, whether it was business related or hotel tax related, but I know they are working to put something together, and we'll stay abreast and apply if there are any opportunities for reimbursement.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions onto the enterprise fund? So again, this is our projection of what the impact of COVID-19 is on the enterprise fund. You'll see, even though we have seen increased activity at our golf course over the last few months, we're still projected to be about 3% below where we were last year in revenues. And again, that's primarily related to, in our previous months, our revenues were down quite a bit. For example, in the month of July, our revenues were actually 40% below where they were last year. So even though we saw some increases, it just hasn't been enough to make up ground over for the decreases in revenue we experienced over the last few months in the fiscal year.
You know, Brandy, those expense numbers to me look a little bit out of whack. I mean, I can understand we're having to spend some more money on taking care of equipment to cut the grass because we're getting more play or whatever it may be, but I don't know if that's on the pay. If I remember right, that's on the payroll side, and I don't understand why they're up almost $70,000 in expenses, and our revenue's down $20,000. It just.
Well, there are some expenses that we will have to incur even if our revenues are down, namely payroll expenses. So that's up 14%.
Why is payroll? Is the payroll just up 14?
Well, when I say payroll, I'm saying payroll and benefits. So has been increases to our pension for the employer side. So that's also baked into that number. There's also health care expenses that we have to pay on the behalf of our employee. That's also baked into that number as well.
Well, have they not had the idea of maybe raising the rate on the how much they charge on the green fees to help make up those extra expenses?
I think, if I'm not mistaken, and Ms. Watson, you can correct me, I think if we were going to have any increases in those fees, I think we would have to go back through the board to get that approved.
Yes, yes, ma'am, you're exactly right. And with that, we have also identified an opportunity for a revenue stream at Linrick by utilizing the Upper Richland facility that we have up there. So there are a couple of things that we want to bring back to the board to try to help even out the revenue and expenses for Linrick. However, there are some major capital improvements that are also needed long-term that does impact the way we get revenue. For instance, the pro shop needs some serious work, and pro shops usually serve as a great revenue producer at these types of facilities, and ours is just not at the level that I feel it should be out at Limerick. So we would like to come back to you at our next meeting and provide you with some strategies after we have a chance to sit down with staff, look at this year's budget, and provide you with some action items for your consideration.
And so, again, Commissioner Lapine, even though our revenues are down again, there are some expenses that we still, again, have to incur, even if our revenues are down. Major driver of that increase, again, is our payroll and benefits. And then we did have some repairs and maintenance expenses that were above what they were last year. And there were some capital outlay expenses that we had to incur as well. And those are not necessarily driven by the revenues. Okay. Are there any additional questions? If not, that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you, Ms. James. I actually neglected to do something at the start of the meeting, and that is to congratulate Dr. Johnson. We've done it privately, but I want to do it publicly on being elected as new representative for House District 80. And we are proud of you. We know you're going to go on to continue to do great things, Jermaine. So I just wanted to make a public proclamation of how proud we are of you, okay?
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for your support. I really do appreciate it, and I plan on representing us all very well and doing some things great for this state.
But don't you still have to win the main election on November?
Yeah, November, we'll take that in stride. But Maricopa, I know Maricopa knows what I'm talking about. We're good to go.
We're claiming it.
Yeah, your
We
only
gonna get you on the
responsibility now
ballot
is
in
you
November?
have to appoint your successor.
Let me just say one thing. In addition to having the most overwhelming election of anyone, he had his picture in the state newspaper more than any other candidate.
Yes, he did. All right, thanks. We're going to move on to other business, and that's the executive director report from Ms. Watson.
Madam Chair, my report is not a long report, for we did have our special call meeting on last week where we were able to take care of a lot of business. We did get the budget passed. Richland County passed their budget on last Thursday. So thank you to all of the board members that were able to get on the call and to hear some of the dialogue that was held. So now we are in the process of prioritizing our budget for fiscal year 2021 so that we are able to accomplish the goals and actions that the board has put in place. In addition, the only other part of my report, and then I'll introduce to you a piece of a part of my report that will be done by Lawrence Flynn in response to a question that Commissioner Lapine asked last week for when it comes to the RCRC budget. We are in a very tricky spot right now for COVID-19. Our numbers across our state are in the top in the nation. I think we're one of the top 10 states for the increased numbers. So that definitely gives me pause as your executive director in when and how to effectively open. For the last 2 weeks, we have been doing skeleton crews inside of our facilities, and some of us have still been working from home. But I will share with you, I have a concern about the number of us that are even here in the main building, because you start to become comfortable, and this is not the time to become comfortable. So we will be scaling back our numbers here. We still will be open, but not to the public. And we're also working with the Columbia City Parks and Recreation as they open some of their facilities. Lastly, we will be having a very small modified summer camp this year. Registration will begin at 5 p.m. today. We have a full modified camp with only 20 children per site. So that's one staff person per 5 children. We have all PPE. We are going to be doing thermometer checks, but I will provide the board with an overview for your information as you may get questions as we move forward with this process. As of right now, that is the only program that we're looking to start back this summer, is the summer camp, so that we can allow parents the opportunity to have childcare as they go back to work, and for young people to get out of the house they've been cooped in over the last 13 and 14 weeks. Our concern as public servants is for the health and well-being, of course, and we will make sure we do everything in our power to ensure that occurs. So that is my update for today, and you will receive additional information from Jamie as it relates to our summer camp, the sites, as well as the dates of operation. We're only looking to run a half-day camp, meaning from 7 to 1 or from 1 to 6, depending on the site. And we will not be changing children during the summer so that we can keep abreast of the children that are coming into the site. What I'm sharing with you are best practices that we have been researching across the country. The YMCA and Boys and Girls Club here in the Midlands have never stopped. They've constantly worked, and we have not seen any hotspots or breakouts from daycare centers or facilities for youth. So we feel very confident that we'll be able to do this. So that concludes my COVID-19 report. Again, congratulations to our Commissioner Jermaine Johnson. He makes us all proud, especially those of us in the blue and white family, for the work that he's been putting out. And now we look forward to hopefully him giving us another great commissioner when he makes that appointment.
I'll work on it, I promise.
But that concludes my portion of my COVID-19 reopening strategy. And I just would like to thank a couple of you who have reached out to me with some of your concerns, and I appreciate your support. But it is just one of those things that none of us could have been prepared for. But we're in this week, but you will see a modified schedule going back for the next 2 weeks. So that concludes what I have thus far for COVID. And before I go into the next portion, are there any questions about the reopening strategy?
Yeah.
Yes,
I've been. Yeah, I've had
Go ahead.
I've had a few people who have reached out to me and asking about the leagues, the baseball leagues, and in those leagues, if they are gonna open up this summer at any time, because the parents are saying they're kind of in limbo and they want to know. They're saying, hey, listen, if y'all not gonna open up, then just let us know. But if you are gonna open up, then let us know. Or what's the strategy? Let's say if you all open up and then there's another spike in COVID, if we're gonna shut down, they just want to know, what's going forward.
We are working directly with the presidents and boards for all of those community leagues, Dr. Johnson, to make sure that we're all on the same page on what activities are allowable and which ones are not. And currently we're in mid-risk, meaning we are allowing individuals to utilize the athletic fields as family groups for skilled and non-shared equipment. In order for us to move forward with the next piece, which would be practices, we are meeting with the leagues and we're working with them to develop their requirements and expectations if they are allowed to have their games. But we have not counseled we don't have the authority to counsel their games, if that makes sense to you. We just are responsible for the access to the facility. So we're working with access to the facility and developing their guidelines so that we can have some safe way of having baseball. But we're working with them, sir.
Okay, I have some questions on the summer camp. What are the dates of the summer camp again?
Right now, ma'am, we're looking at that first Monday. Tamika, do you have those of you for summer camp? We're looking at July 6th through July 30th. 30th, excuse me.
I'm sorry, give me that again.
July 6th through July 30th.
And the camp will run Monday through Thursday. We'll need time to disinfect and clean in between.
And where would they be located?
I'll send you the list. We are finalizing the list today, ensuring that we have all we need from a social distancing standpoint, but we're looking at about 14 sites, Ms. Lindsay.
Okay, our COVID numbers went up to 800 per day for the last 2 or 3 days. And I'm very concerned about that, because if we open summer camp and these children get sick, what happens? Why can't we wait until July or even August for the summer camp? And at least let our numbers start going down instead of increasing. What's the rush to have a summer camp if you can get kids infected? In fact, the Move Gym that I attend, well, I don't attend it, but they had a case recently in Sand Hills and they closed the whole facility down because one person in there had COVID-19. So why are we putting our kids at risk for summer camp?
Well, Ms. Lindsay, I will share with you from the research that I've done.
And not had a 14-day decrease at all.
Yes, ma'am. Based off of the research that we've done and where we've looked, the youth ages from 5 to 12, the age group that we are focusing our camps on, is not in that highly susceptible group of case spreading. The numbers that we've been looking at show anywhere between middle age up to seniors for our numbers here in Richland County. And by no means are we rushing. I'm just putting things in place in case those numbers do drop. We can't wait and have registration that day. So right now what we've established are plans so that if these numbers are more encouraging, we will be able to move forward. If they're not, the numbers aren't the only thing that we're looking at. We're looking at several triggers along with the library system, but we are going to make sure that before we do anything that we have all of our information and things in place. But it is difficult to not do anything when we do know that we still have children that need recreation and parents that need childcare.
Well, Richland County is still closed. I mean, at present, their employees are working at home. So
Well, some of their
I
employees-
know it's other people working. I know. So, I mean, whatever means they're keeping the children now, if they're still out, because the governor extended last week another 15 more days.
Yes, ma'am.
So
Well-
I just can't see the reason for opening summer camps, and with our numbers as high as they are.
Duly noted, ma'am. That's all that I have for the COVID. Are there any additional questions? And Ms. Lindsay will make sure that we keep the board abreast of any new developments, if camp actually will start on that July date based off of the triggers, which includes that 14-day decrease in numbers and that downward trajectory. Madam Chair, this portion of my report, I would like to bring to the forefront Mr. Lawrence Flynn. Last week during our budget discussions, Commissioner Lapine had some questions about how do we move forward as an agency for future budget cycles where there are possibilities for decreased funding. How can the commission be in a better position to sustain funding in order to accomplish the charter that was put in place for the commission? Lawrence and I've had this dialogue a couple of times, but today what I've asked him to do is to bring to you the dialogue about the possibility of a referendum. How would we go about doing so? And if it's something that we would be interested in, we would need to have a separate special call meeting, and he can walk us through what those steps would be. So at this time, Madam Chair, I'll turn this over to Mr. Lawrence Flynn.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry, I was muted. So, Lakita, just to confirm, are we doing this in open session?
Yes, sir. We're doing this
Okay.
in open session, high level.
Got it. Just making sure. I was just wanted to make sure I was tracking the agenda.
Yes, sir.
So guys, at a high level, and this is one of the things we had originally talked about doing, was to do a little bit of board training, which I think it would be helpful for everyone that's, everyone is basically new to this organization, to talk through what it is to be a special purpose district. And unfortunately, you're kind of the redheaded stepchild of local government in South Carolina. And I say that simply because, we kind of know what school districts are. We know what powers cities have. We know what powers counties have. And historically, special purpose districts were there basically just to kind of fill the needs of local government activity that couldn't formally be fulfilled by the counties. Because prior to home rule, which is the idea of the legislature transitioning their power from the state house to the local jurisdictions, counties were just administrative arms of the state. They were, in many cases, the county supervisor, as you now know him, was kind of known as the road supervisor, because their main function as an outgrowth of the state was to pave roads. And that's how they got a lot of things accomplished. And then as the state became less rural and started to grow a little bit, and home rule was implemented through some constitutional amendments in the 70s, we transitioned to this idea of giving counties powers similar to those that cities have. So that's your traditional functions of fire, police, limited now water, sewer. They can't do electric and gas, but recreation, all of those things that you historically thought that a city could do, that are the reason that all these special purpose districts like yourselves exist. And it's interesting that y'all's boundaries coincide and overlap with the unincorporated areas of Richland County. That's very intentional, because prior to home rule coming to effect in Richland County, and there's been lots of lawsuits and fighting through the years between Richland County and Richland Recreation District over who maintains those functions. as to who is ultimately responsible for providing recreation services. And so we can now unequivocally state that recreation services in Richland County, at least in the unincorporated areas of Richland County, are provided by this body. And that is expressed in the legislative mandate that is given in your enabling legislation. So when we talk about special purpose districts and you hear this concept home rule, you are not a home rule institution. You are a what's called Dillon's rule institution, meaning that you only have those powers that have been explicitly given to you by the legislature, as opposed to a city or now a county that has home rule powers, which basically means they can do anything that's not otherwise expressly prohibited by the Constitution. So the example of that would be cities can be in the business of being a water and sewer provider or an electric provider. But in order to do that, there's a constitutional restriction that they have to have a going into the business referendum, a referendum of the voters to allow them to provide that function. You established your powers by special legislation that has been amended basically 10 or 15 times at this point. And so you were created in 1960. You're originally known as the Rural Recreation District of Richland County. And now your official designation, based on some recent change, or the kind of the last set of changes, is the Recreation District of Richland County. That's your formal legal name. And so in going back through and reading that documentation, and I'm more than willing to share copies of it with anyone that wants to see it. It's about 50 or 60 pages long, and it's been amended several times. It had authorization for how you constitute your board, what powers you have, how you borrow money, how you implement your bylaws, how you employ an executive director, how that executive director ultimately administers and operates the day-to-day operations of the organization. But interestingly, when you were originally created in 1960, you were not given taxing powers. That did not come along until 1965, when you were given the express ability through an amendment to your general powers to levy half of a mill. That was then amended in 1967 to allow you to go to 1.5 mills. And then most recently in 1969, that's actually the same statute that changed your name from the Rural Recreation District of Richland County to the Recreation District of Richland County to give you this 5 mill authorization. And by the terms of the way that your enabling legislation is drafted, as it said, I'm just going to read it to you because it's helpful, I think, to hear it. It says, you are authorized to levy upon all taxable property in the district a tax not exceeding 5 mills to meet the cost of operating, maintaining parks, playgrounds, recreation facilities under your jurisdiction. So that's the express authorization. And for a really long time, and Mayor Bob may have the benefit of some of the more recent history on this, and exactly what y'all's millage history has been, because he's been in Richland County politics longer than I have been. But in throughout the 60s, into the 70s, into the 80s, my understanding is that you operated on the 5 mill levy. That was the amount that was statutory created in 69, and you levied it every single year, and that's what you used to make your operations. You may have been supplemented by Richland County at some point, but throughout time, that was what you had. And then in the mid-90s, you were challenged, and a taxpayer in your community, and it's a public record, this is Weaver versus Richland County, sued you to basically say it is unconstitutional, and there's some provisions as to why they believe it's unconstitutional, for an appointed body like yourselves. Obviously, y'all are appointed by legislative, or you're appointed by the governor upon the recommendation of the legislative delegation. It is unconstitutional to grant taxing authorization to an appointed body. So an appointed being different than, say, Richland County, who's obviously elected. You know, those are folks that run for those particular jurisdictions, those particular seats, as opposed to you being appointed by the governor upon the recommendation of legislative delegation. And they said that is an impermissible delegation of the legislative function, basically giving an appointed body taxing authority. And we can dig into the justification or the legal validity as to whether or not that was the correct decision. But be that as it may, the court basically invalidated your ability to levy taxes. But they made the ruling prospective. And so they came out with it in 1997. And they basically put some direct language into their opinion. And they stated on the record in the opinion a direction to the legislature to basically fix the problem that they created by their ruling. And they say, we're cognizant of the disruptive effect of today's holding could have on the financial operation of numerous special purpose districts. And accordingly, we give the General Assembly an opportunity to address this problem, and we hold that this decision shall be applied prospectively beginning December 31 of 1999. So basically what they did is they punted, and they said, we don't think that this is permissible, but we realize that if we just completely strip away your ability to tax, it's going to crater every other appointed special purpose district in the state, because this didn't just affect you. It affected any other recreation district provider in the state, any other fire district, you name it, any service provider, special purpose district that was reliant on taxes. And so in response, the legislature enacted a general piece of legislation, because one of the things that you'll see, and one of the things that is now manifest as a special purpose district, the distinction between Dillon's rule and home rule, is that you can no longer pass laws affecting a single county. And if some of y'all may remember, there was the legislature I think it was like in 2009, 2008, passed a piece of special legislation basically devolving the ability of the legislative delegation to appoint your board seats to the county council. And this board at the time challenged that, saying that that is an impermissible piece of special legislation because it was legislation that only affected a single county, that being Richland County. And the court ruled that unconstitutional because you can no longer, under the Constitution, have a special law affecting only a single county. They invalidated that legislation, and that's the reason that you are still enacted and appointed under your original authorization. Sorry for the short aside, but just that's the structure we're dealing with. So unfortunately, under this home rule authorization, we have to deal with your original enabling legislation from the 60s, which can't be updated or changed in any way after March 7th, 1973. So here we are 50 years later, and the only way we can make adjustments to you as a special purpose district at any level are to pass generally applicable legislation that affects all special purpose districts, which is problematic because you're a special purpose district that only provides recreation services. But if you pass some general piece of legislation, it affects the water SPDs and the sewer SPDs and the fire SPDs and the public safety SPDs. So it becomes a much harder construct to work within. But be that as it may, this was the lawsuit basically said, legislature, you need to come up with a solution to fix this. And as opposed to just burying their head in the sand, the legislature came up with, I think, what was the most reasonable compromise. And so they passed a piece of general legislation, and it said, and it's now been codified at section 6-11-271. And it says that any special purpose district with an appointed board, which would obviously be like yourselves, that either has a statutory cap in their millage authorization, like your up to 5 mills, or has pure discretion in your determination to levy millage. So some special purpose districts have language that said something along the lines of may levy millage up to whatever level they so determine as necessary to provide for the operations. If you're either one of those and you have an appointed board, your millage is frozen at the level that existed as of 1997. Well, so the good thing for you is that you were levying 5 mills at the time that Mr. Weaver challenged you. That was the cap under your legislation. And you just continued kind of status quo. And now we fast forward 23 years later, there's a separate section of the same kind of provision of codes that allows you to bypass your statutory millage cap by going to county council as the elected body to bypass that cap. And so in going to county council every single year to validate your budget, you're obviously operating at a millage level well in excess of the 5 mills now. You're, I think somewhere in the neighborhood of 13 to 15 mills. And when I talk about millage in this context, I'm talking about operating millage as opposed to debt service millage. Debt service millage can't have restrictions on it because you've pledged that as security to bondholders. So when we talk about operating millage, that's all we're talking about here. But every single year, that's the reason you have to go back to county council to get their blessing and their approval to bypass your 5 mil cap. Because if county council didn't approve it and they refused to approve your budget or they refused to approve this adjustment, you would be set back to the pre-1997 ruling where you were invalidated and deemed unconstitutional in your millage levy. which is, again, as we talked about before, would cap. But that would be catastrophic as a result because y'all become obviously very reliant on the millage increases that have been put in place. So I was tasked with the responsibility of coming up with what is the process for potentially avoiding this responsibility that Richland County approve your budget every year. And there's basically one workaround to it, and that is going to the public at large and requesting what we call a tax levy referendum. And it's expressly authorized by statute. It's laid out in 6-11-273, and it basically says upon a petition of the board of the special purpose district, you may submit a petition to the county election commission. Noted, it says to the county election commission, you don't have to go through county council, and request a tax levy referendum to be approved by the voters in your community. And so basically what we would do is, assuming council or the commission was comfortable to move forward, we would adopt a resolution, attach a petition to it, and the petition would basically require the Richland County the Richland County Election Commission to hold a referendum on a date certain that you would either be responsible for paying, or if it's in the regular general election cycle, it would just fall in the general election, to basically ask the question of the voting public, your authorization to raise your statutory millage cap from 5 mills to whatever number you ultimately determine. And there's a bit of a science to that. At some level you want to protect the upside of being able to continue to increase your millage as needed, based on the Act 388 limitations of CPI and population growth every year. But you also want to act within some discretion because you want the voters to approve it. So, the idea of putting a millage question to them that says, can we go from 5 mills to 100 mills? That probably doesn't fly. And we also have to tread very carefully because in an elected body, you cannot use public resources in support of a public referendum question. So all we can provide is factual information about how much money it will generate, the services that that otherwise pays and provides. So at some level, it becomes a truly democratic process where the voters will get to decide whether or not they want you to have this independent taxing authority. But the process is not terribly difficult. It takes a single resolution by this board to request the referendum question. That referendum question would then be passed on to the election commission. And then the election commission has 60 days from the date on which they receive it to run the notices in the newspaper. And then you either hold it on a special election date, or if you chose to hold it on the November general election cycle, say of this year, you just need to make sure that you submit that question to them by no later than August 15th at noon prior to the election cycle. So that's, if it was something that the commission decided that they were interested in potentially pursuing, that would be the next step, is that we would prepare a resolution. Resolution would be submitted to the election commission, and it would need to be finalized and prepared in advance of August 15th of this year in order to be on the November general ballot.
Thank you, Lawrence. I know that was a lot.
Yeah, sorry, I get going.
It's okay.
Feel free, we can go back and revisit any of it.
Exactly, that's what I was about to say. I know that was a lot for today, but in the timing that we had to get together, and we knew we had a board meeting, it was important for me that you heard from our subject matter expert. And Rob and I spoke a little bit last week about this, and we know that, this is different. So we would like to have some separate dialogue about this, but I wanted today to at least introduce you to these ideas and for you to go back, and if there are any questions that you have about this, and then I will come to you at a possible closed meeting to request us to move forward. If you all feel confident and comfortable, and I'm feeling confident and comfortable, but I want to first, of course, bring it to the board. How do we strategically do this? Mayor Bob, I don't know if you foresee, as we talked about this, any negativity or any pushback. We haven't had any dialogue. This is our first time talking about this, but I just felt it was important to bring it to you, our governing body, and then we can expand the conversation at a later time. But today I wanted to just present this information. Mayor Coble.
Presentation, the home rule, and everything involved. I framed things with the South Carolina Go Gamecocks there. I would say that, you know, if the argument is
Can't hear you, Bob.
We can't hear you, Mayor Bob, and you like you giving us some good information.
let's see. Wait a minute.
Okay, here you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
I was just saying that was a great presentation of home rule, and that was very good. Now, somehow can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
stay there.
Let me just say this. I thought that presentation was outstanding. I think it's very doable. And I can fill in some details when I can figure out technology on my end, not everybody else's end. I would say I like the framed pictures of the national championship on the wall. And let me say this. I think now that we have a superstar in the legislature who understands all of this, you know, we could look at some other things too, legislatively.
Yes, and I will be more than happy than assisting on that effort, because I know what it's been like for the past 3.5+ years for us newbies being on here, and how difficult it's been. So absolutely.
Okay. All right, so Madam Chair, I wasn't asking for a vote or anything today. I just wanted to present the information to you all and possibly set up a separate meeting and training for the board for these two items to discuss, you know, who we are, where we're going, but then the money piece, how we get there. So we can have that dialogue after today's meeting, and I can re-engage Lawrence at that time. But he did share with us some crucial timelines that we need to be thinking about, and I'll document this conversation. If Lawrence and I can get together and kind of put it in a 1, 2, 3, share it with you, and then come back. So that's all that I have for my report, Madam Chair, and that concludes this portion of today's meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Lawrence. That was very informative. I actually took some notes during that.
We'll see next time if I give the same presentation. It's the same.
Yeah, well, all right. Thanks. So we are going to take a motion now regarding executive session.
I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session.
I second.
Motion's been made and properly second. Cornelia?
Cotton,
Yes.
Lapine, Commissioner Lapine. I'll come back. I still see him on. Lindsay,
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Coach V. I wonder what happened to Commissioner Lapine and Coach V.
They're muted.
Yeah,
Well, they're muted.
Who is that? Coach V. Commissioner Lapine. Okay, well, I've got 4 votes, so
we can go.
motion approved for executive session.
All right. Thanks.
Okay.
All right. So we came out of executive session. No motions were made. No votes were taken. At this time, we're going to take up the election of the officers for the 2020-2021 cycle. So at this time, if there's a motion regarding the election.
I make a motion to select officers for 2021.
Okay. Any nomination of officers?
Rob Lapine as chair. Donzetta Lindsay, vice chair. Stephen Vinegar Paul, secretary.
Okay. So that motion's been made. Is there a second?
I second.
Okay. Motion's been made and properly second. Cornelia?
Cotton,
Yes.
Lapine,
Yes.
Lindsay,
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Coach V.
Yes.
Motion approved unanimously.
Congratulations, everyone.
Congratulations, everyone.
Congratulations.
So let me get this straight now. So when am I off out the chair? July 1st
The hot
or
seat.
when? Now?
When are you off
Today?
the hot seat?
July 1st.
All righty.
Really, Lisa?
July 1st. All right. Congratulations, everyone. We'll take a motion now regarding adjournment.
Make a motion to adjourn.
A second.
Motion's been made and properly second. Cornelia?
Cotton,
Yes.
Lapine,
Yes.
Lindsay,
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Coach V.
Yes.
Motion approved.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
See you
you.
guys.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Have a
Bye.
good
Stay
one.
safe.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.